had a wonderful conversation with Kent Lamm, and we went into so many territories of filmmaking, of AI, of our future and our past selves, of what we expect and didn't expect out of what the world is becoming. Why don't you listen and let us know what you feel and what your questions are? Welcome to Co-Creative Conversations from Co-Creator-Circle. Today I'm going to speak with Kent Lamm, and we're going to speak about something we haven't really touched upon before, which is about films and stories and how to bring the two together. And I'm also hoping that Kent will be able to teach us something while we're on this call. You know what co-creative conversations is about? It's about a way of igniting your inspiration. And we're hoping that as you're listening, questions are coming up in your mind. Maybe there are ideas that you want to share with us later. Because a co creative conversation isn't really complete without that is the listener's participation. So we do hope you will listen actively and later also participate and ask questions, comments, or anything else that you'd like to. A little bit about Kent. Kent Lamm is an independent filmmaker. He's based in Los Angeles, California, and he teaches the art and craft of storytelling through film. He has a YouTube channel, Standard Story Company, which has almost 250,000 subscribers. So, as I welcome you, Kent, the first thought that's sort of coming into my mind is Standard Story. How did you come up with this name?
Yeah, that was probably back in like 2015 or so, and I had just finished reading a biography of John D. Rockefeller and how he, started Standard Oil. And there was something about that really struck me, which is the way he picked the name for it. Basically, his idea was, or at least in the book, they said he didn't want to name it like, Johnny D's oil or something like that. He wanted it to have nothing to do with him, but he wanted it to sound so ubiquitous and, standard that when people thought of Standard Oil, it just kind of spoke for itself. It's like, well, that's the standard, so you just go with Standard Oil. And it just made it sound more official, I guess. But the reason that I kind of gravitated towards that and intentionally created a very like minimalist and simple logo, which I probably spent about 30 minutes making, was that's the same thing that I was trying to do with storytelling, especially at that time too. I really wanted to just kind of like standardize or just raise the standards for what I considered good storytelling. And so that was kind of an aspirational title of like, I want to be the standard for storytelling. And so Standard Story Company just kind of jumped out at me, just like Standard Oil Company, but with stories. Although hopefully I won't be such a, uh, greedy, monopolistic sort of company.
I don't think you will be. But this is so exciting for me, and I'm glad that I didn't know this. And you may have even published it somewhere how you came upon the name. Because as I'm listening to you, I realize this is such a beautiful interconnection, because that's exactly one of the reasons why I named the work that I do Co-Creator Circle, because I didn't want it to be about me. When I started this whole thing, my students and colleagues were telling me it should be your website, Meenakshi. You should have your name. And I said, what's the point if it's just about me? One, I mean, okay, it sounds grandiose, but maybe you want something that outlasts me. But also because nothing we really do is just about us, isn't it? It's also you're drawing in the people who you want to speak to, you're communicating. So I want to jump into something that I was asking you, Kent, because one of the things that you do, you say that you help people to make a story, to tell stories from a film. Can you expand a little about that? And then I'll ask you my follow-up question.
Yeah, I mean, when we first chose that name, that was, and when I say we, like I started this whole thing with my friend Chris, who we kind of grew up making movies together. And we were only making films at that time. I hadn't even started with the whole educational side of it. But again, it was the same thing. It was like, well, let's kind of make our whole brand and what we do really just like story first, kind of focusing on the fundamentals of what we considered good sound storytelling and less about the style, so more substance over style. Then when it came to teaching, that really all started during COVID, where I was just kind of locked in my little studio apartment for a long time. Wasn't able to make any movies because, it's a collaborative medium. So turned to YouTube and started just talking about some of my experiences and things that I've learned along the way. Because I've been doing this since I was like, I don't know, 11 or something. And eventually it picked up some steam, but the focus was still the same. I just thought that talking about storytelling itself and just like the fundamentals of writing and how when you start with that script and what you're writing, that just should carry through to everything, like every creative decision that's made along the way. And a lot of times I felt like just style and flashiness was just becoming more important, especially on YouTube. Like the filmmakers that were on YouTube at that time just seemed way more interested in just having like flashy transitions and shots and almost like travel videos were becoming what was considered filmmaking. So I was trying to help kind of balance that out a little bit. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's where I was coming from with that.
Yeah, so you're saying that you wanted people to focus more on the story that they're telling because that's where the substance would come.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so for example, if someone is making a travel video, what would be, how would the story come out? Like,
Well, a lot of times it doesn't. It's just fancy shots and like drone shots of, the beach and then some 360 camera spin or something like that. And, that stuff has its place and it's cool. But I think there's just a big difference between a narrative story, which you can put into something like that for sure. If you wanted to make a travel video and elevate it, I think adding a narrative is a really good way to do that. And you could do that as simply by, just every story kind of comes down to the same thing. It's like a character who wants something, but they face an obstacle. And then how do they overcome that obstacle or succumb to the obstacle? So you could just do the same thing and just set up a character who wants something at the beginning of the trip, maybe before they take the trip. Then they go through the trip, and then at the end, you see them get it or get something else. Maybe not the thing they wanted, but the thing they needed. Or, there's a lot of different ways to end it. And you don't have to say all those things directly, even they can all be kind of just suggested. But by doing that, I would think that you're going to elevate your travel video or your, you know, corporate video or your whatever you're doing a lot.
so how would, let's say, I had to make a film about Co-Creator Circle. And what would you suggest that I do? How do I tell the story of what it is that we're doing and what we hope to do? Would that both the things come into one story, or would those be two separate stories?
Yeah, I would just try to merge it all together and think about, okay, well, if you're trying to tell the story of Co-Creator Circle, um, what is the problem that Co-Creator Circle is facing, and what is who are you going to be representing Co-Creator Circle in this story? Like, we need some kind of, character or protagonist that we could root for or stand behind and see where they're coming from, at least. It's really just about uh, people say that like characters have to be likable and stuff, but that's not really true. Obviously, there's a lot of characters that we love to watch, even though we would hate to be, stuck in an elevator with them or something like that. It's really just about, can you understand and empathize with the character in a way and just connect with them, even if you don't actually like them or condone anything that they do. So yeah, if you can just present a character that is representing the goals of Co-Creator Circle and what they're trying to do, but then show the obstacles that they're facing, um, and then just find a nice little way to wrap it up in a neat little bow, ideally in a way that kind of connects to the way it started out, then that's just a very simple formula for especially a shorter story. Tends to work pretty well. But with like a short film or anything that's going to be, feature length films that are like an hour and a half, 2 hours long, there can be a lot of different storylines weaving through. And I think for short films, a lot of the times it makes the most sense to just boil everything down to the simplest situation, or just like a single situation, a single relationship, a single character trait or something like that. You're really focusing as much as you can on one thing and trying to tell the biggest story through like the smallest lens possible. I think that's the most powerful way to use like the medium of a shorter story like that. So I would think about that for Co-Creator Circle. Like what's the like analogy or metaphor or the one little thing that says so much about what we're trying to do? And then the more you just examine that and just kind of narrow your focus, it's one of those things where the more specific you are, the more universal the message can be or the result can be.
I love that. I've already got so many ideas from what you're saying. Like, I was just
Nice.
thinking of having two people, maybe just talking or showing their lifestyle. Someone who believes that we are co-creating a world, and maybe someone who doesn't, who feels that everything is just happening to us and we're not doing anything. And we're not really like victims, but it's like the world is happening to me. Because
Right.
we do meet people like that who feel, no, 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 nothing is in our hands. Or, yeah, so many ideas have come from what you're saying, Kent. And so let's see, maybe we'll make a movie and then run it by you for your class. And you
Do it.
can tell
Yeah,
us. So, what
definitely.
is your process? How do you teach? How do you teach people how to make the film?
Well, it depends a little bit on where they're starting from. Like I have a filmmaking school kind of online where I teach the whole process, just the way that makes most sense to me and that I think is the most practical, especially because, most people who are making narrative films aren't doing it with like Hollywood resources. They're doing it in a very scrappy way and just finding people to help, finding whatever tools and gear they need to do and just making it happen. So I just kind of approach it from that, and I approach everything from working backwards. So to me, the very beginning of that is figuring out what you have access to even make a film with, primarily basing your story around those things, and then thinking about what kind of effect you want to, I guess, create with your story. And I think of that as like the reason for even making the film. And when you can figure that out, which a lot of people don't, and I think is a detriment to the strength of their film. They'll just kind of make a film just because, or just they don't really know why, but they think it's kind of cool or whatever. And then they go make it, and then you end up a lot of times having something that's just not that impactful. Versus if you kind of were like, okay, you know what? My uncle has a barn that he doesn't use that I could go film a movie in for free. And maybe I could do some kind of like a little horror short film in that barn and whatever it's going to be about. I don't know, a haunted goat that lives there or something. But you have to just think about, okay, from there, why am I drawn to this story? And like kind of ask yourself that question. And what do I get the most excited about with this story? And if you can actually figure that out, and it might just be as simple as like, oh, I want to make people scared of goats forever. I think that's really fun. I haven't seen a scary goat in a film before. and I think I can figure out some fun ways to do that, then that's a good enough reason to me because that kind of can guide you and be your North Star for all the creative decisions that you're going to make along the way. Because you might get to a situation where it's like, okay, this character goes into the barn, and then, you know what? I don't know where they're going to go first or what's going to happen first. And then if you just think back to like, well, at the end of the day, I just want to make this the scariest goat ever seen, then that can guide your decision and be like, okay, we she looks over and she sees the goat's horns just like over the side of a ledge or something, and she knows it's there, and then it's gone. Then I don't know. You start to figure, it starts to answer the questions for you. So for me, a lot of the way I teach is just not really by giving people the answers, but by trying to show them how to ask the right questions to find those answers themselves. Because it's usually not about the specific uh, answer that they might be looking for, like, oh, how do I know what shot to do for this? Well, it's like there's like an infinite number of camera angles that you could use to shoot anything. So that's not a very helpful question. A more helpful question is, what am I trying to do with this moment in the film? Like, why do I feel the need to shoot this? Why is this in the script? Why am I shooting it right now? And if you can just parse that out, and this is where, thinking like a storyteller actually matters. If you can actually think about, well, I know why it's in the script. It's in the script because I wanted to have her looking for the goat here because uh, the goat escaped from the farm last week and nobody's seen it. And if she doesn't get the goat back, then there's going to be, her dad's going to flip out or something like that, whatever it is. I don't know. Horrible example I'm rolling with, but let's keep going. And then, okay, well, the reason it's in the script is she needs to find the goat before her dad gets home. Okay, great. Uh, that can help guide you. So now it's like, well, this moment is about her being worried that she's going to run out of time and not find the goat. So that's going to like narrow down our options a little bit and get our brain thinking in the right way of like, okay, well, maybe we want to see her face then. If we want to show that she's worried, let's get more of a close up. And that kind of just keeps going from there.
So I'm thinking that a lot of it could be like editing, maybe you make many more scenes. I mean, you shoot many more scenes than you might need. And what about like getting, like you said, getting a close up? Maybe you take two kinds of things. I mean, one long shot, one. So is this all post production, or is this something you should plan? Do you do a lot of planning, like each shot? You do a lot of that?
Oh, yeah. So these are good questions. So writing really is a lot like editing. I mean, typically a movie is kind of written three times. You'll write it on the page. You'll write something a little different when you're actually filming it because all these different people and things are coming together in ways that you can't fully predict. So you're really rewriting the movie as you shoot it, whether you're changing lines or whatever or not. It's getting written slightly differently. And then when you're in the edit, that's like the third rewrite where you can really, again, do the same thing. You might find new things. You might realize, oh, that scene didn't even need to be there, or yeah, there's all kinds of ways. I've totally changed endings of films in the edit, and it worked way better. You just find it. You didn't realize it till you get there, and then you realize, oh, this was the obvious, correct, best ending that I somehow missed the whole time. So, but then the other question of do you kind of cover your bases and shoot multiple versions of a scene, or we call that coverage when you're shooting like, well, I'll get it in a close up, I'll get it in a wider shot, I'll get it in like over somebody's shoulder, all these different angles so that you can in the edit figure out how exactly you want to tell that scene or that moment. And that is how most films are shot. Like they'll give themselves coverage for most scenes, basically every scene. But when you're like a low budget filmmaker, or I would argue even when you're making like a huge movie, it's best not to lean on that. Like give yourself all these options and all these ways to cover yourself if the scene is not working out the way you wanted, because you're really not taking a stance creatively when you shoot that way. You are just kind of it's almost like you're trying to be everything to everyone and you're just not really like saying anything visually with your shots. So right now I'm in the process of, we call it shot listing or storyboarding, you might have heard of, where you're like, figuring out all the shots that you want to get for your film. I'm doing that with my cinematographer for this big short that we want to make. And with every single shot, fortunately, we're both on the same page about how we want to do this. Like, it's not just about showing what's on the page, like, oh, okay, this guy's in a river panning for gold. Well, let's just show the river and we'll show him and see that he's panning for gold. Like, that's not really enough. It's like you want to say, okay, how can we say something with the shot visually about what's happening to kind of be suggestive and show more. It should be working on multiple levels, ideally, if you're really planning these things out. So, and there's so many ways to do that. So like one way that we were approaching that was, what if each of these shots is kind of showing us something new about the character? And, the audience might not get that, but subconsciously they probably will. So like if you're seeing, you know, just his hands or something like that, and they're all beat up and whatever, then he's been working for a long time. If you're seeing um, his eyes or just a normal close up, it's not just about showing his face; it's about showing a look in his face or something in his eyes that we want to see at that moment. So, and then there's like way more convoluted ways of doing those things too. But on a basic level, that's kind of how I think about it. So planning is kind of everything. The more you can prep, like that's a director's entire job to me, is to figure it all out before you get on set so that when you show up on set, you're like extremely prepared. You're on the same page as your team, like your cinematographer, your actors, everybody. And then anything that you're trying to figure out on set is kind of like small potatoes, and you're not just running into giant things that, because once you're on set, like money is just flying out the window, like even if you have a pretty small team. So you want to try to figure it all out before. And then ideally, you're so well prepared that if you do get struck by inspiration on set, then you're willing to just like kind of throw out your plan because you know you can always fall back on it, but you just have that confidence now to be like, well, let's do this instead. This looks good. And then, but it's hard to improvise like that if you're improvising from the very beginning. You're kind of more coming at it from more of a panicked, fearful state than a confident, prepared state.
Yeah, that really reminds me of how I prepare for these for the podcast. I like to know a little bit about the person I'm going to speak to. I think about the questions I should ask or I can, but then they are like you said, they are there in case I don't know what to ask as we are speaking. But actually, most of the time, the talking, if you're doing active listening and so many thoughts just come and the questions just flow. I'm going back to the time when you said that you started more on YouTube during COVID, because it was during the pandemic closures that we also had started a lot of Zoom calls for Co-Creator Circle. And in the beginning, many people would come, and then now, of course, there are more things which are being done in person. The difference, therefore, was that in the beginning we had people from all over the world, but when you're doing in-person events, it's just the people who are physically near you. The reason I'm bringing this out is because what I feel that happened with your YouTube channel is that suddenly, was there a sudden spurt when you had so many followers, or did it go slowly? And when it did happen, what was the first moment when you felt, yes, this is happening? And how did you feel?
Oh yeah. So I started doing it, I think January 2021. And my goal was, okay, every week I'll put up a YouTube video talking about some other aspect of filmmaking. And then I realized how hard that actually was to do. So I wasn't the best about staying that consistent. Sometimes I would do maybe four in a row, and then sometimes it would be like 2 or 3 months before the next one came up. So it was all over the place. But I gave myself when I started just uh, I told myself I have to do the equivalent of 1 year's worth of these videos. So that in my head, it was like, I have to do 52 videos and then I can say I gave it my best shot or whatever. And I could stop doing this if it's nothing's happening. And I think it was about a year and a half later, and my girlfriend Tony and I were on a trip to Solvang, which is this weird little like Dutch town in California, a couple hours out of LA. And right before we had left, I had really, I was at that point just freelance editing for work, and I was doing the YouTube stuff just kind of on the side. But nobody was really watching it. There wasn't a lot of growth there. It was just kind of a flat line the entire time. And I had some small following just because I'd put all my old movies up on the YouTube channel. So maybe I had like 18,000 subscribers, but like, every video I put up, it was getting maybe like a few hundred views or maybe like a couple thousand if it was like a huge hit or something like that. Um, and I just got to a point where I said, okay, this summer, I've been saving up my money from work. So this summer, I'm not going to take any freelance jobs. I'm going to purely focus on YouTube, and I'm going to be very consistent, and I'm just going to treat it like a full-time job. And if nothing happens at the end of these 3 months, then I feel comfortable calling it quits and moving on. And when I did that, and I had just made a short film right around then, so I had like some good making of videos to post. But I think it was just the consistency over that period of time. One of my old videos from like a year prior just suddenly started blowing up, and we're out of town on this trip. And then I tell Tony, like, this is kind of crazy. I'm like looking at my phone, I'm like, I feel like I'm getting a lot of views right now. This is weird. And I just kind of expected it to go away like the next day. And then the next day it was like probably double that or something. And then the next day it just like kept going up. And it was mostly from this one old video about how I first became an editor. And then all the other videos started like picking up at the same time because I think people would start like binge watching. And so it was very sudden. And I think in, I started getting like 2,000 subscribers a day like that week. It just started blowing up. Unfortunately, I was already in the mode of treating it like a full-time job, so I could just like I was like, okay, I'm gonna make some more editing videos then, and I made a few of those and just kept at it. And I think it was good that my backlog of videos was kind of all roughly the same quality. So uh they started picking up kind of one after the other, and yeah. Um, but to answer your question of how that all felt, it felt crazy. It was really very exciting because I was pretty burnt out on editing at that point. I'd been editing professionally for a long time, and it was never something that I intended to have as like my career. I like editing, but I was just burnt out on it. And YouTube was very exciting, and I felt like I had all the kind of skills to be able to do it. So I was yeah, very excited. I would say for the first like year after that, like every day I would just wake up and I would just be like, I'm so excited to work today and to do this stuff. It was all very new. And I still have those days, but I also I'm also comfortable enough with YouTube now to get very frustrated on other days too. So um yeah, I don't take it for granted for sure. But it feels like more of a real kind of job or vocation, I guess now, as opposed to then where it was just like, I don't know, I felt like I had won the lottery or something and I was getting to do this crazy thing and like actually make a living off it. I kind of tapered off of editing as YouTube picked up. So slowly just eventually completely stopped doing freelance work. Although, if something comes along, I might still do it. But yeah. Sorry for the rambly answer. Hopefully that
No, no,
answered it.
that really answered what I wanted to know. How you felt was, in fact, you were able to tell it like what you say, that make a story of how you of what you're doing, you know. And sometimes you do it as a film, and sometimes you do it in how you talk. The telling of it is so important. You know, it makes it more real than if it was a one-line answer. In fact, one of the things which I say for about co-creator circle and the conversations is that we talk with people who are talking their walk and walking their talk. So, what is it? What do you think is the talk that you're walking?
What is the talk that I'm walking? I mean, I guess it's just I the videos that I put out on YouTube compared to other ones, especially in my niche of filmmaking, are actually, I would say, pretty like lo-fi. Like they're not that fancy. They're mostly just me sitting right here exactly like this, just talking to the camera and saying, just trying to break things down and explain things or telling, my experiences. But compared to other channels, they are way more flashy and like visually really well done. Like some of these people are cinematographers by trade, so their channels and their videos are just really pretty to look at. And I thought about doing that more with my videos, and then I just kind of realized, like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not my thing, and that's not it's not who I want to be. That's not what I want to put my energy into, and I don't think that's why anybody watches my channel in the first place. I think they watch my channel to more for like the theory, the strategy, the ideas, like the nuts and bolts of storytelling, which doesn't need to look like $1 million to be enjoyable to watch. You can watch a film, and actually, that was the last short film I made. I shot it on my iPhone with Tony in our house here, and I thought it was very entertaining. You know, it's very short, but um, that's it's really all it takes if you're just it's about kind of having like empathy for your audience at a certain level where you can kind of put yourself in their shoes as they're watching what you're making. And if you can think about that a little bit while you're making it and while you're writing it, and think about if I was watching this for the first time, like how would I feel? What would I be thinking about? Would I be guessing what's about to happen? Like there's all these questions, but those things are so much more important than the lighting, how fancy of a camera you're using, how insane your locations and your production value is and all of that. Like people really go to the movies because they want to fall in love with characters and watch amazing performances by the actors and just get swept away in a story. And that's way more important than what the film actually looks like.
I love what you've just described. You know, when you're talking, then there's always a need you feel of constant talking, you know? But it's so interesting, Ken. Something, I don't know, there's so many things that you've said in this. I feel I can unpack a lot when I listen to this later. But one of the most important things that I got from this is what you spoke a little bit about. I think you mentioned earlier and later, you know, how you may have felt about making a film and how you actually decided to do it. And one of the things in my mind was this: if you had to think about now it's sort of broadening the scope of what we've been talking, not only films, but in general the world. You know, if you looked at the world through your lens, how do you feel is looking now? How is it looking like how you felt it would when you were, let's say, 20 years old?
No, not at all. It looks
What's
incredibly different from how I thought it might look. Uh, Especially lately with I feel like a lot of people in the filmmaking space look at the AI stuff that's happening and like the AI video now, which is becoming more and more. widespread, and they're starting to question like, what is my role in the world if you can type a sentence into the computer and it will create a cinematic shot of that thing that you just typed out. And that and the fact that at least in Los Angeles, the film industry is like taking a huge hit, and there's a lot of people that are really just like not working. There's been like a 40% dip in the amount of like shooting days out here for TV shows and movies, which is due to a lot of factors, I think, but should rebound. Anyway, so there's just a lot going on. I think movies in general, and I know we're going to talk about the wider world too, but just still in the movie zone, movies in general, I think when I was 20, there was a lot more chances being taken. And now it's hard to go to the movie theater and not see a movie that doesn't have a number at the end of it, like two or, part seven or whatever it is, or a remake or a reboot. So there's like fewer and fewer big swings being taken by major studios. And I feel like that's kind of reflective of a lot of things in the world. Like you just don't see, you see a lot of like safer bets and just kind of, ultimately it might just boil down to like greed and being profit driven and not wanting to maybe just like not trusting new ideas and big chances and things like that. So yeah, it's kind of uh sad in a way, I guess. But on the other hand, I don't think anybody could have predicted just how widespread technology would become and how interconnected people could become through that technology. So, the idea that I can like create a full film on my phone that's just in my pocket, and most people have one of these all the time. Uh, it's pretty insane. And I think we're getting closer and closer to the point where anybody can make any kind of story a reality and share it with the entire world instantaneously, which is these are all things that were impossible like 40 years ago or something. So there's a lot of good stuff too. And I think what we're going to kind of see both in film and in other industries too, especially in creative things, is just a branching off between kind of independently created stuff where it's a lot more focused on like individual creatives and personalities and brands and just like smaller groups of people who work together. And then like the giant, machines of, Hollywood and other big industries that make things on a much bigger scale, but are probably more like diluted in terms of the actual creative voice that's coming out of it. And I think ultimately people will have a mix of both that they tune into or pay attention to or support. And I think that's ultimately probably really good for creative people. I think they'll individuals will gain more market share as it just becomes easier and easier to get connected to people, which I found through the YouTube channel too. Like part of the reason I was interested in the YouTube channel was like, well, by teaching, I can kind of also introduce myself and my films to people and show them who I am and what my voice is. And, while I'm teaching, I'm putting my own work out there and hopefully building an audience for myself. And I think another benefit of calling it Standard Story Company and not like the Kent Lamm channel or whatever is it frees me up to make totally different stuff on my own if I ever wanted to. Like I could really, who knows I don't know what I'm going to be making 10 years from now or what I'm going to be interested in. So to kind of have the flexibility to be like, well, this isn't like a Standard Story Company thing. This is like a Kent Lamm project or vice versa. Or, I don't even know if I'm going to be like, I would love to be a producer and to be able to hire other filmmakers that I believed in to make films under the umbrella of Standard Story Company, like just as a producer. So those are all things that would be nice. And I just kind of see the world going that direction where, uh, I guess the studios and the major industries don't have as much of a stranglehold just because of how democratized technology. I mean, look at 3D printing, like even manufacturing is getting kind of shaken up. So that's what I'm thinking. What do you think?
Well, because I look at it in a wider way, I was thinking like you thought that you couldn't have predicted what's happening now. But I remember when we were kids and we saw those comics of the Jetsons and we read 1984 and uh, and I loved science fiction. I don't know if you can know this, but
Same. No, I
I
love it.
love the movies about the future and Star Trek and things like that. A little bit more than Star Wars, but we won't say that because you want to see how people will evolve. It can't just be that technology evolves, people evolve. And that's one of the things which so it's not that surprising. But what's shocking to me actually is that when AI is coming, and we have a talk about that, a discussion about it next year. uh, what are people going to do? I feel that this is human beings should become more human. But I find like sometimes when I'm talking to people, and they are I don't know, they are techs. They don't show their face. They're showing me their AI version. I don't want to see your AI version. I want to see you.
That's a
There's
great
enough
point.
AI
Yeah.
versions out there. You know, I really thought that people would become a challenge to be more human, make eye contact. Like one of the things I don't like in Zoom is that you're not really making eye contact, you know like for me, because when I'm talking to my family which is in different countries, as you know, when I'm talking to them, it's only when I look at the camera which is ahead, then
Yeah, yeah.
so it's not both of you
You have
looking
to
at
choose.
one
Do
another.
they get to see my eyes or do I get to see their eyes? You can't have them both.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So when I look for the
Mm.
future, somehow technologically, this is what I look for. Is technology going to make the distance more human rather than the human more distant?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I agree though. I think I mean we're still at such like the early stages of this AI stuff, but I do think you have a point that as the AI becomes more and more just everywhere and it's affecting every part of our life, I think we will see people swing more towards the human in like everything that we do, even if that means really starting to like embrace flaws and imperfections and sloppiness and everything that we do because that makes it feel more human, which is actually really cool. I love that. One of my problems with a lot of like Hollywood films is they're so obsessed with everything being so polished. And if you look at older movies from the 60s or something, you'll see a lot of little flaws and like I enjoy that. I feel like that kind of just shows where your priorities are when you're just spending millions of dollars to like CGI out all the little imperfections and change, add in digital tears to an actor or something. I'm like, what are we even doing? Just accept the limitations at a certain point, and be happy with that. But yeah, I think that's gonna it's gonna completely change how we communicate with each other and interact with each other, relate to each other, and definitely how we tell stories and make films too. It's just gonna be an across the board like pendulum swing away from like, oh look, AI can let us do everything perfectly all the time, and then we're all gonna get so sick of it and we're gonna hate it and we're gonna feel so alienated from, how we actually feel and our internal world that everything's just gonna start swinging back and you know,
But
everything's going to be
something
messy.
very interesting happened recently because I love writing. For me, writing is for my own enjoyment, to express myself. It doesn't matter to me if someone's reading or not, as long as I've done that. And but recently, I wanted to write something about co-creator circle. Like we're going in another direction. So and people said, Meenakshi, just look at it, look at AI, and they do this, they do that. So I put something onto ChatGPT. Oh, this is what I'm going to be calling it. And do you know what ChatGPT tells me?
What?
Emotion. Like, oh my gosh, I needed an AI to tell me. And this is actually interesting in many levels, because in our normal business corporate kind of life, you almost have to be like an inhuman, a non-human person, I should say. You know,
Yeah.
you're not
Yeah.
allowed to bring your emotions into it. And I will say that this is actually less in the US than, let's say, in India. In India,
Mm.
we don't have our family photos in our offices.
Mm.
If you're talking to someone and a family member calls, you've got to pretend that doesn't exist. It's not like that here. I'll be talking to a colleague, and they'll say, "Oh, my mother's calling me." Maybe. So in that sense, I'm hoping that we'll realize that it's really never been that we've never really allowed ourselves to be human enough. And that's one
Yeah.
of the things which I like so much about what you're saying, Kent, is that you're showing that humanness. Tell your story, make your movie, be more real, have a plan, but if you have to change it, change it, but don't just go hoping that something will come into your mind. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And talking about the movie you made with your film, I mean, with your phone, I saw it. It's so gripping that a person like me, who often flips to the end of a book or the end of the movie to see how it's going to end, I you can't do that with your movie. You're just
Oh,
caught in
thank you.
it. You're in it. And I mean, it's beautiful. You've really made it so well. So I can imagine how well you must be teaching, Kent. And that was my next question. Because you already give so many hints in two ways, and lots of teaching, one on your YouTube channel, which is free, and also on your newsletter that I signed up for. I love
Ah,
it.
nice. Yeah.
But you say you also have a school. So what do you teach in the school? And I'm expecting that the school is with a subscription.
Yeah, so it's like a paid course essentially, but the difference between, the free stuff like on YouTube or the weekly newsletter I do and something like this, I actually have two courses. I have one for writing, like kind of a simplified approach to writing short film scripts, and another one for kind of everything involved with making a short film and showing you how to do that in a month. And the reason that those are better served as a course is a couple reasons. One, it's like YouTube and the newsletters are just giving you different topics every week. You don't know what's going to come next. There's no structure to it. It's almost like you're just picking out, you know, different little toys or something out of like a Happy Meal or something. That's a horrible metaphor. I'm sure there's a better one out there. Anyways, it's just random. Versus the course is all about one goal and it's structured. So it's all about guiding you step by step towards one goal or one transformation. In this case, for a lot of people, it's like they might have ideas for films or they might have made a bunch of films, but they're just not happy with the quality or how long it takes or how frustrating the process is. So this course is about kind of breaking them out of that, whatever they're stuck in, and showing them how because I went like 8 months making a short film every month for the YouTube channel, like way back in the day. And that was such a transformative experience for me. And I found that like if more people did this kind of thing where they just forced themselves to make a short film in a month and maybe do that more than once, they would probably have like a similar amount of growth as like storytellers and filmmakers. So that's the reason I made that course. But yeah, it shows you how to write. Like the first week's about writing, and then you get into doing like the pre-production stuff of like planning it out, bringing people on, scheduling it, setting your shoot date, and then everything's like working you towards that shoot date near the end of the month. And at the end of the day, you've wrapped your film, so it's called Wrapped in 30 Days. And yeah, it's amazing. Like I think 200 people, more than 200 have gone through it now. A lot of them have like finished their first film ever, or they've made a bunch of films before, but like they started getting into film festivals. And some of them, like, this led to them working on other people's sets, like moving to LA, starting to like work in the film industry. So it's pretty crazy. And there's students from all around the world that do it. And then with the other course, that one's just kind of like a 2 hour crash course. So you can do that whole thing in a weekend and then have a script by the end of the the weekend. So it's like a much more, but yeah, it's about breaking people out of their patterns and then showing them like, hey, there's another way to do this. Um, and ideally, when you're doing something creative like this, you don't want to be thinking so much about like, what do I do next? And like, oh, I don't know how to do that. Or it can be very overwhelming. So to have like a structure and kind of support and accountability and also the knowledge that's in there, it kind of breaks you out of that and lets you just focus on like telling a great story, being creative, and like enjoying the process. So
So is that like is that live or are they all recorded or do people get
they're
FaceTime with you?
yeah, they're all recorded, and then with the bigger one, the Wrapped in 30 Days course, there is a live component to it where there's like a community, and so we can give feedback on each other's scripts and edits and stuff like that. And then I've just switched it over to now being you can only join the course during certain like live sessions, so it's like a cohort based thing. So we're doing one in January, and we're all going to be making our films together at the same time. And every week I'll jump in and do like a group call with everybody, see how everybody's doing on their thing. And then hopefully by the time that fourth call comes up, everybody's ready to shoot their film. And that's the goal. But yeah, I've found that because before it was like anybody could join whenever they wanted. And having the accountability and just the like energy of other people doing the exact same thing that you're doing adds a lot to the experience. So I think it's better to do it this way.
So we'll put a link to that in
Sure. It's
yeah.
wrapped.school is where you can find that course.
Okay. And that's with the WRAPPED? Yeah,
Yep.
okay. Okay. And you mentioned that you've got students from different places. What about films made by different countries? Uh,
Oh yeah. Yeah, we've had at least one guy from India who was really cool and he was working in VFX over there, but he had wanted to like make his first movies and stuff. And we've had people from all over like Belgium, Japan, uh shoot, the UK. I don't know. It's been a bunch of people. Most of them are in the US. Oh, Mexico. But yeah, it's very very fun to see different types of stories and films that come out of all these places. But honestly, the bigger differentiating factor between what kinds of movies people end up making when they do it is not where they live, it's like what their prior experience is, both in film or video and just in their lives. So some people come into it knowing like, I want to make a film about something to do with this topic or thing or something I have experience with. And this just gives them the ways to do it. And some people are like, I'm a more of a cinematographer, but I want to learn how to be like an overall storyteller, filmmaker. And so, their film's going to end up looking pretty good, but it's fun to see them pull a whole story together.
And what about you? What are the influences that have, what has influenced you? Are they directors or filmmakers from other countries and also, of course, from the US?
Yeah, a lot, a lot. I I don't know. I'm really drawn to like the films of the 70s a lot. I feel like the pace was a lot slower back then. They would take their time more. They would, like we were saying earlier, they wouldn't just shoot coverage most of the time. They would have a point of view as they shot a scene. And you can just feel that. Even if you don't know exactly where the filmmaker's coming from, when shots are specific and they feel specific, it's a very different experience watching the movie. So a lot of that. Also, but there's a lot of filmmakers working today that are really inspiring, like Paul Thomas Anderson, who made There Will Be Blood and Boogie Nights and all these other movies. He's incredible. The Master. Denis Villeneuve, who's really big right now, and I don't think he's made anything less than an awesome movie every time. Uh, I mean, Scorsese, Kubrick, all these people were very influential to me for sure. And then other stuff too. I mean, I love like, Haruki Murakami novels, like just like all kinds of things kind of inspire me. I ended up studying creative writing in college. I didn't go to film school. I tried to go to film school, but I got rejected twice. And I said, I'm just going to not do that anymore. I'm not going to try to do that anymore. So I did creative writing. And I'm actually really grateful for that now because before I did that, I would kind of avoid reading. Like in high school, I would just skim. I would just do the least I could to get away with it most of the time. And then in college, being forced to actually open books and read them was very beneficial to me. And I kind of had a suspicion that, if my peers are going to film school, they're probably learning more technical stuff and less about stories and writing. So I might have an advantage here if I can learn more about this, and even if it's at the expense of less about the other stuff. And I think that's true because the way I think about movies and stuff, it's so story based that I feel like it gives me maybe a little something extra.
Yeah, that's your edge. That's what you brought into it.
Yeah.
Love that. I love that about how making a film is not just about scenes, it's about telling a particular story, and that you can do it with a short film. Who would be a benefit from your course? Like,
Basically anybody that's, if you've always wanted to make a film or try filmmaking and like bringing a story to life, but you don't know how, or you find the process overwhelming, which it definitely can be. Or if you've made films and you're just not connecting with audiences, a big word that I like to use with the course is like, I don't want to teach you how to make a film. I want to teach you how to make a crowd-pleasing film. Because I think ultimately, as pretentious as we might be as filmmakers, like if your ultimate goal isn't to entertain, then you're kind of like gonna miss the point of the whole project. Like you can connect with people and move them and all these things, but like underneath all of that is entertainment. And then you kind of like you stack on top of that any other more lofty goals that you might have. Because if they're not entertained, they're not going to finish the movie. So like, why did you even bother trying to do all this, important filmmaking if it's incredibly boring? So that is the idea. And I think a lot of people they just have blind spots that maybe they're aware of or maybe they're not. So it's like, you know, uh, they know how to use a camera and maybe they know even how to edit, but they don't know how to write a good short film, or they don't know, maybe it is some of the like directing side that they're not comfortable with. Maybe they don't know how to like talk to actors or edit. There's like an editing part of the course too. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into making a film, and I think just having everything under one roof that people can use as a reference for forever and like repeat and rinse and repeat is very useful.
one of the well, the motto or the vision of Co-Creator Circle is that together humanity is co-creating a world that benefits all. I know it doesn't always seem like it, but I would love your perspective on that. Do you feel that as human beings, the world that we are creating or co-creating is better?
I think that's such a great question. I think so. I want to think so. I try to be a optimistic person, but at the same time, I feel like there's a lot of forces at play that divide us and make us work against each other and in our own worst interests collectively. And sometimes I think it's hard as um, a human race to realize that how interconnected we all are and how easy it is for us to, you know, work against our own best interest by being like opposed to other people. And that maybe if we were all just operated like bees in one big hive mind, that things would be easier because there would be so much order. But then at the same time, think about all the beauty and interesting stuff that you would completely lose if we were all that connected. So to answer your question, I have no idea, but I think that ultimately humans are good people and they lean towards trying to be good to each other. But maybe it's just hard to get to that good core at times and to see that in each other and to like realize how one with each other we kind of all are. I don't know. It's a very cautious optimism, I guess, is where I'm coming from.
Well, I'll take that. I think it's important, and it's important for me to know what youngsters like you are feeling, you know? I think also, even just this conversation between the generations that you and I represent is so important because in so many ways there is so much different between you and me, you know. And yet when we talk, when we converse with one another, we find so many ways in which we can interconnect, maybe learn from one another. If nothing else, just see like over one another's shoulders. I know you said you don't always want to put a camera on one another's shoulders, but maybe sometimes that really helps. Actually, I really liked that because sometimes we say that somebody wants to shoot a gun from one another's shoulders, you know, but shooting a scene from one another's shoulders, I like that metaphor a lot, you know, because I'm able to see the world from your viewpoint and you're able to see from mine, you know? And
Yeah.
so suppose you were to look at this world from your 50-year-old self. What advice do you think your 50-year-old self would give you now? Or what vision would that 50-year-old self give you?
I actually think about this a lot. I have a poster back here that says My Life in Weeks, and it's just a big grid of boxes that lead up to like the average lifespan of like whatever it is. And you put in your birthday. So I'm observing how many weeks of my life are going by. And at the end of every week, I fill in a box and then I'm forced to ask myself, like, was that worth a box? Was that a good use of one of these boxes? Or was that um could I have taken or leave in that box? So I do think about this a lot, and I actually also have like a little mantra. Let me see if I can pull it up. That so apparently the most common regrets in life are there's a few of them. So I put them in my like daily to-do list thing every day so that I have to just acknowledge this and try not to do these things. And so it just says, don't ignore your dreams, don't work too much, say what you think, cultivate friendships, be happy. And yeah, I try to just remember that. Be happy is kind of the hardest one because it's so like you can't just be something. You can do things that might lead you to be happy. So maybe I should reword that one. But I do think all the other ones are very practical things that you can actually think about and do, and will probably have a big impact on your life. So I think if I'm 50 and I'm looking back at myself, I'm probably telling myself all of those things. Don't ignore your dreams. Don't work too much. Say what you think. Cultivate friendships. Be happy. And I'm probably, I don't know. I mean, the easiest way to answer that question is to think about what I would tell myself maybe 10 or 20 years previously from now. And I'd probably say all of those things. And yeah, I'd probably just say like relax a little bit and nothing has to happen on any certain time frame because I used to think about that a lot. Um, I don't know though. It's what would you say? I want to hear your answer.
What would I say to which self?
Let's say, okay, let's go for the younger self first, and then let's do the older self.
I would really tell my younger self, give importance to being happy. See that it's both things. One, that happiness is really inside you, and don't give the keys of your happiness to anyone else or anything else. Because really, the way that you look at the world can change if you realize that you are really in control of yourself and you are in charge.
That's
Because
good.
for me, the world I see becomes so much better. It is so much better than I thought it would be when I was younger. You're
Hmm.
probably at an age which was probably the toughest toughest time for me. Uh,
Oh, well,
you know, it becomes a little better as you gain a perspective.
it's good to know.
Yeah.
You know what? I might give myself some of that advice too. I actually feel like when I was 20, everything seemed way more scary, difficult, ominous, and like depressing. And over time, I mean, there's been ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys, but it's overall, I feel a lot better than I did back then. Um, so wait, what would your older self say to you now, you think?
Exercise, look after yourself,
Yeah, those are great
don't
answers too.
neglect
Dang.
health.
You had those queued up too. You knew.
Let do your thing.
I can't hear you. What'd you say?
I said, let Eric teach you strength training.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those are very good pieces of advice. I'm trying to take that into account too. I think the issue is you know what? I think I know what the older version of myself would tell me. I think he would tell me to don't make the things that you create your identity. You know, make them just things that you create and just like move away from. Like your value has nothing to do with whatever you come up with or your output or whatever. It's they're really not connected at all. So just be happy with yourself, even if you're in total like a state of total stasis where nothing is actually coming out of you, and you'll have a much happier life. Unfortunately, and I think a lot of filmmakers feel the same way. You can spend a lot of time on a project or even just a video or something, and then when it's comes out and it's just like a flop or nobody cares or nobody watches it or whatever, it's really easy to get down on yourself and take that as a reflection of your own self-worth. But it's not how it works. It's just, you know, you're learning a craft, you're learning an art, and it even the masters make stuff that doesn't work all the time. But yeah, just if I could just teach myself that the process is really the only thing that you should focus on. Like if you can just completely let go of any uh, cares or concerns or expectations about the results of what you're working on, then you can probably be much happier. And then I would think using that, I would tell my younger self to just purely focus on the things that give you energy and happiness in life and pursue those as much as you can and avoid the things, or at least be very aware of the things that you feel are draining your energy and feel like a constant uphill battle. That's probably not something that you want to like spend most of your life doing.
I think this is one of those drop mic moments when we can end this beautiful. I really enjoyed speaking with you, Kent.
Same, this was fun.
It was. And you never know when I make my movie, maybe I'm going to join your class and have you give me tips on how we make the movie.
Please do. Or just, yeah, give me a ring whenever. If you want to do a table read, go through the script, whatever. Let's do it.
Yay! Thank you so much, Kent. Thank you
Thank
for this
you.
conversation. And again, I'm encouraging our listeners. Do you have a question for them that you want them to answer or a suggestion?
Um, I guess if you were
If you have a story to tell, make a movie.
Meenakshi, I already dropped the mic, so I don't know what else I'm gonna say right now. I don't have a microphone. How am I going to say anything? That's why I couldn't come up with an answer.
You're right. I have the mic, and I'm saying, you want to tell a story, make a movie. You want to make a movie, tell a story.
Ah, that's great. That's so much better than whatever I was about to say.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Kent Lamm. I just had a co-creative conversation with Meenakshi about filmmaking, storytelling, the way the world's going, and what role stories have in our lives. I think you'll enjoy it.